Hi, these fabulous women have just been included in, is it Skunk Magazine's 100 Hottest Women in Weed or something? Sorry.
Most influential and hot.
Sorry, most influential and hot, yeah. So we're very excited to welcome such illustrious guests to Nimbin. Thanks for coming all this way. Seriously, Rebecca has started the Vancouver Seed Bank, so that's a pretty major thing to have done, so well done, and continuing it. Woo! And Ajia Mae-Moon is a powerhouse of all sorts of things, including the Three Happy Cats, which is an online dispensary, right?
Yeah. Medical marijuana dispensary.
Yeah. You can use that. Oh, perfect. And also 12 High Chicks and Weed Woman, which I think you're going to share with us tomorrow as well.
That's correct.
Okay, so over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us. Loving being here. This is great. I'm wearing pants with bats on them because I hear this is bat country, so to honor the bat, great pollinators.
Yeah, we've seen a couple bats on our trip up here. They're pretty big. We have pretty small bats back at home. So Rebecca and I are here to discuss the history of Canadian law reform in the cannabis industry. Cannabis has been around in Canada before we were even a country. So we formed in 1867. And in 1606 is when we started cultivating the first hemp fields, which were planted by Louis Harper. He was, I believe, a French Canadian, and he started in Nova Scotia with our first hemp fields.
Yeah, he rallied for a long time to finally get hemp cultivated in Canada. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And then we kind of kept up with that until about 1873, where we began using marijuana for medical use. I believe we were one of the first countries to openly allow that.
Mm-hmm. And it was mostly like in tincture form, I believe. Like you didn't see a lot of people smoking cannabis, but there was a lot of tinctures, a lot of edibles, and that was a common thing in the apothecaries at the time. The Canadian or British doctors recognized cannabis as a common medicine back then.
Yeah, so if we skip on through to 1923, cannabis was added to the Narcotics Drug Act.
Yeah, that's when stuff went down. Yeah, and this really paralleled the Americans, didn't it? Like, basically the Americans were passing laws against marijuana back then. And so we were like, well, we're Canada. We got to do that too.
Yeah, so we definitely followed suit with the Americans quite a bit.
Yeah, there was no vote. It was basically just snuck in 1922. Cannabis was added. That was it.
We were still, however, allowing people to use it for medical use, but by prescription only. So you weren't able to just go and grab it. You had to go to your doctor, and you could get a tincture at the pharmacist. Eventually, in 1939, we made cannabis prohibited, straight across the board. No hemp, no cannabis, no seed, nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That made it obviously really hard for Canadians, especially those that had been getting used to using it as a medical product.
For sure. And a big hit to the Canadian farmers, too, who had relied on hemp as an industry up until that point for hundreds of years, really.
They were told to dispose of their hemp fields, and they had only like so many days to destroy their livelihood.
Right. Hemp seed as well, which was controversial at the time.
Yeah, it was very controversial. If we skip forward a little bit further to 1969, Canada launched its first $4 million marijuana program, but not for medical purposes. This was kind of the first of its kind. We decided to do a recreational medical marijuana, exploration study. Kind of went in some weird directions, but it definitely opened our Liberal Party's eyes open to what it could be used for on a recreational basis.
Right. This was the Ladan Commission?
Yes, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That took 5 years for them to conduct the study. And at 5 years, they concluded that it didn't have any harmful repercussions as a recreational drug.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but Pierre Trudeau, who was the prime minister at the time, he's the one who actually commissioned the study in the hopes that it would prove that we could at least modernize our cannabis laws at the time. Unfortunately, we just ignored everything that this 5-year study had concluded, which was basically that marijuana was less harmful than alcohol, probably should be regulated in a similar way to alcohol, And the basic problems all stem from it being illegal, not so much the product itself. But for some reason, I guess probably because pressure from the Americans, because at this point, we had Ronald Reagan coming into office. It was the late
That's
70s.
Right.
The environment was less friendly. We basically just threw that study out.
Yeah, we did, unfortunately. And then in 1971, Pierre Elliott Trudeau kind of came in and promised us the legalization of marijuana, and I'll let you carry on with that one.
Exactly. Pierre Trudeau, 1971, he basically was elected on the platform of legalization. He told a group of students that having a joint should be no more crime than having a glass of wine. And basically, he was elected on that platform, but once he was elected, the laws never changed. So we were basically just stuck in a prohibition environment. And in the 80s, everything just got worse. Pierre Trudeau was voted out of office, and we had Brian Mulroney voted into office. And him and Ronald Reagan were just best friends. So we had just the drug war continuing to ramp up in the 80s, unfortunately. Brian Mulroney also passed some very controversial different types of prohibition laws in terms of literature and in terms of music. So suddenly in Canada, all types of cannabis books and magazines were also prohibited, and several raids occurred across Canada, but luckily several Canadian citizens did take these laws to court and challenged them in the Supreme Court and found they did violate our Charter of Rights. So some of Brian Mulroney's literature censorship laws have been struck down since then. But really, it was only because Canadian citizens challenged the censorship laws, which was good. Then basically, we've had more ramping up. In the 90s, the one glimmer of hope was 1996 when California started to legalize for medical use. That really began a little bit of a movement in Canada as well, as people started to realize that there was a medical need for the citizens of Canada. I believe it was 1999 where the first Supreme Court challenge took place, and we did win because we found that prohibition did stop people from being able to access cannabis, and that did violate their Charter of Rights. And so we had Section 56, which was the first step in Canada's medical marijuana program. It basically allowed people to be exempt from the cannabis drug laws, which meant that they were allowed to possess only because they were completely exempt from the cannabis laws. And this worked for a little while. For about 5 to 7 years, this was the program. But again, the citizens took the Canadian government to court saying this is way too difficult for us to access this program. Medical marijuana should be easy for us to access the same way it is in California. So Health Canada was basically forced to start a medical marijuana program by the Supreme Court. And it's been a back and forth challenge ever since then. Basically, Health Canada is fighting the citizens of Canada, but the Supreme Court is mediating and basically forcing the government of Canada to produce some sort of medical marijuana program, even though it kind of sucks, but it's a start anyway.
Absolutely, it was a good start. Shortly after that, we introduced one of the first synthesized or pharmaceutical grade THCs, which is offered in a pill form. This helped with a lot of people that weren't able to smoke, but then created controversy amongst, more natural hippie pot smokers that felt that, big pharma was coming in to kind of take over the job. I personally use both the flower as well as pharmaceutical grade marijuana, and we've since then brought Marinol off the market and brought a new product in called Sesament. But a lot of people argue the point that the flower is where it's at, and then from there, I believe we then started challenging the government over our right to grow.
Yes, exactly. Now, the nice thing about basically the first incarnation of Canada's, I believe it was the MMAR, the Medical Marijuana Access Regulations, was that people who had a doctor's note that recognized they had an ailment that Health Canada recognized cannabis helps with, as long as they had that form, they could choose to either designate an individual to grow for them, or grow for themselves, or buy from Prairie Plant Systems, who was the legal provider at the time. So that was a nice spectrum. That was all kinds of different options there. And most people really prefer to grow their own. That way they know what they're getting and exactly what was put in it and exactly what they want. But since then, the program has unfortunately changed. Health Canada decided that people should not have the right to grow themselves anymore. Rather, they'll just designate licensed producers that medical marijuana patients will have to buy from. So this has become a really controversial decision, because not only does it take away the individual right to grow, but it also forces sick people to spend a lot of money on their medical cannabis, which was kind of like really against the socialist way of Canada, really.
Yeah, and that's where people like I step in. I was bold enough to open up a non-storefront dispensary for medical purposes. A lot of people have storefronts. In fact, one of the first ones was opened in 1997.
That's right.
That was the Vancouver...
the British Columbia Compassion Club
Compassion
Society.
Club, that's right.
Yeah.
And from there, in 2009, the fourth storefront dispensary called VDS was opened by Dana Larson.
Right. And that was a big deal, because really up until that point, the BC Compassion Club Society was really the only place, the only little retail storefront in all of Vancouver that was actually supplying medical marijuana to people outside of the government system. And Dana Larson did something pretty ballsy. He basically used the template that the BC Compassion Club Society had been operating under for like 10 years quietly, and applied that to his own dispensary. And just kind of on a gamble, hoping that since the BC Compassion Club Society had been open for so long without any incident, hopefully as long as he followed that same template, that would happen as well. And it did. And then that kind of exploded, and that's why we have close to 90 apparently dispensaries.
Yeah, we have just over 90
Vancouver.
Dispensaries. And it's interesting you should talk about templates, because the original template was a nonprofit society. You were allowed to have storefront, and you were allowed to have as many patients as you wanted, and you were allowed to give them as much marijuana as they required.
And this is not really like legal, because the government, like the federal government, doesn't really recognize this process. Like the federal government technically says this is illegal, but the Vancouver police, the city police, are kind of letting this happen anyway.
Yeah, and they're collecting my taxes and sending me my return every year.
Are they ever?
On April 1st of 2014, the federal government decided that storefronts were illegal, and that we would no longer be able to operate under a nonprofit society agreement.
Yes, this is the new MMPR.
So I created a new template based on the MMPR program. Instead of having storefront, I have an online dispensary. So instead of just serving Vancouver, I now serve all of Canada. I do exactly what the MMPR system does, except I don't charge over the nonprofit society agreement. So I'm kind of allowing both systems to work side by side while still helping the patients and not upsetting anybody. And there's only 5, as far as I know, in all of Canada that operate strictly by mail order system that are not regulated under the MMPR. And then again, shortly after that, it was January 1st of this year, they said, okay, no storefronts, pay your taxes, and you can't advertise. So then they nipped us in the butt one more time, making it even harder to be able to stay open as small shops. We took it upon ourselves to open up the 3happycats.tv station so that we weren't advertising, but still talking about weed and getting your name out there. So they're making us jump through hoops, but we're creative and young enough that we're able to get through those hoops and keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Like the Dutch encounter the same problems. You'll go to Amsterdam, and they're not actually allowed to have pot leaves in the coffee shops. They're not allowed to have any kind of cannabis or paraphernalia showing, but it doesn't matter. People know what's going on. So
of course.
You've got to be a little bit clever with it, because it happens. Any type of industry, especially in Canada, it's really difficult to advertise even in legitimate sources. As soon as they find out there's cannabis or cannabis seeds even involved, that's it. You can't apply anymore.
So I approached the city of Vancouver telling them that I want a business license to sell marijuana, and they basically laughed at me.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I said, well, I want to sell marijuana then for medical purposes. They basically laughed at me. And so I went back and I said, I want to be a holistics company and sell dried herbs to people. Ding, here you go, goodbye. I just never told them what herbs I am selling them to.
Just keep it general,
So that keeps me in the paying my tax field and doing everything right beyond having the MMPR license,
Exactly. So we're really, we're still struggling. At this point, really literally as we speak, the Canadian cannabis medical community is in a Supreme Court challenge. So we're sort of awaiting the results as this is happening, because the current medical exemptees obviously don't like this new program where they're forced to buy from large licensed producers for upwards of $10 to $15 a gram for their medicine. They're fighting this, but of course Health Canada and the Canadian government is dragging it out. So it could be a year or two before we actually get any type of conclusion with this. So it's all sort of in flux. But the really important thing that I noticed is that the government passes really bad laws over time, and it's really up to the Canadian citizens to go and fight them, because if we don't do anything, the government will just continue to pass really bad laws that aren't in the best interest of Canadians.
Absolutely. That's why I joined politics in 2011. I joined the BC and the federal NDP at convention, both in Vancouver and again in Richmond. They were trying to pass some very interesting new age laws that kind of revolved around making pot more of a criminal activity than it needed to be. We also helped save a program called Insight, which is a harm reduction program in Vancouver. They help address people that are using drugs that are not marijuana, i.e. injection drugs, smoking drugs like crack, cocaine, heroin.
Which is a huge problem in Vancouver,
huge problem in Vancouver, but we need these programs to be open in order to make sure that people are happy and healthy, at least to the best that we can do. So we popped in there, and there was enough of us to be able to vote out what the other people wanted. And because we showed up and made the time to be at these political gatherings, we did make a difference. Going out to the polls and voting is not enough. Infiltrating the system, becoming the system, and then making it your own is definitely the way to go. And if all of you join politics today, you are the stars. I used to sit outside at protest rallies, you know, save whatever, and then I realized, you know, the only way to stop this or save this is to just get in there and actually start writing these policies and voting them through.
Exactly. Be there when the policies are written, be there to make sure the policies get passed, and be there to make sure that the party enforces the policies for the next couple of years. It's a commitment, but it's part of the game.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge commitment. I actually went there with knowing nothing about politics. I got a crash course on how Canadian politics works with a grade 6 book. They're like, okay, this is how it works on a federal level. This is how you vote. This is where you go, and this is where you write, and this is where you submit. And I was like, okay, I can do this, and we did. It was actually very amazing. We overthrew the table in the first time in 75 years.
That's awesome.
And had them listen about medical marijuana and change their mind, which was great.
It's very satisfying for sure. And it's really important. In Canada right now, the voter turnout is abysmal. We have about a 60% voter turnout in Canada. And that's why we have Stephen Harper in power, because it's basically only the people 50 plus that are voting, and the rest of Canadians are completely apathetic about politics. So basically the slogan for 2015 is just show up and vote. So because people really need to get involved, otherwise it'll just be Stephen Harper again, and more tar sands and more drug prohibition.
I think we should talk a little bit about what's going on in our city with our city going up against the federal government licensing our dispensaries.
This is the most recent thing.
Yeah, this happened while we left, so we're like, 2 days into being here, and we find out, oh, we're going to get real business licenses. Look at that.
Yeah, I'm in a weird gray area, because I have a retail store in Vancouver that just sells cannabis seeds, but even that is enough for me to be declined for a business license, because cannabis seeds are technically illegal. So unless I lie to the city, that I won't be allowed a business license either. So basically, the city has denied all of the dispensaries a business license thus far, which would normally be around $100 a year annually to just get your little license from the city. But they've denied everybody thus far. It's been about 6 years now that the dispensaries have been gradually opening, and there's close to 90, as I said. Now the city is saying, hey, why don't we actually give you guys licenses, but we're going to maybe charge you $30,000 a year for them.
And we have restrictions on where you can be and how you conduct business.
Right. So there's probably going to be restrictions similar to the Dutch coffee shops, where they can't be within certain meters of a school.
It was 300 meters of a school, 300 meters of a public center or recreational area that's publicly funded.
Right.
But what I didn't understand was the 300 meters from another existing dispensary.
Yeah, that's weird.
Many dispensaries in Vancouver, they're friends, they share buildings. In some
Vancouver's
cases,
not a big
they
city,
share
really.
units. One dispensary and another, they've opened a building together. They're side by side. That is a really big
Yeah, that's weird.
problem, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the city, although it seems like extortion, really, like they're offering us this license with several conditions. The worst of all being that basically the federal government and Health Canada does not like this idea at all, and probably like they can't, like the city can't guarantee that the federal government isn't going to come in and shut us down anyway.
Which they could.
Yeah, so they could, we could pay $30,000 for this 1 year and then still get busted. That would kind of suck, but that's something that could happen, and that's the current climate in Vancouver as we speak.
Yeah, the only thing is when they put that through, it doesn't say anything about online dispensaries only. So I'm not sure
if I were you, I'd just be like, fuck it.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I actually apply to this new law because I don't have a storefront and I exist everywhere. I have an incorporated company that's federally approved, so I can be anywhere in Canada I want to be.
It's definitely an advantage of being online. You're more stealth that way. It's hard for them to like get rid of you physically
because my address is actually a web page according to the incorporated business people of British Columbia, or business services. We're located at www.3happycatsup.is. That's
well, I
their
hope that as
address.
just cannabis seed sales, I don't know. A person from the city did come to my store. He said I was on a list of all of the places. So as far as the city is concerned, I'm considered a dispensary, although I don't actually sell the final product. I just sell like a lot of seeds.
Interesting.
So.
Well, we share a building, so.
Yeah.
We could just somehow put a stick between us, and you can stand on that side, and I'll stand on this side.
We'll be safe.
Yeah, we'll be safe.
Yeah. Yep. So I feel like Australia has a lot of parallels to Canadian politics, especially in the way that the population is very spread out here, and you have small pockets of people. So it's really important to get busy on a civic level in terms of the city policies, as well as on a federal level. That's been our most successful methods thus far as Canadians. Just showing up is also helpful.
So that's pretty much everything that's going on in Canada and has happened. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Well, wait a sec. So we got the microphone on you.
Are you on?
I love Canada. Thank you so much. Just by chance, we actually have compulsory voting in Australia.
Right.
So, you know, you have to show up.
It's sort of ironic to be forced to vote, but I'm kind of behind that idea, to be honest.
Look, we see it as a right and a responsibility.
Good.
You know, you get the right to. But I was really interested in your business licenses because you're saying you couldn't get a business license, but you were still operating.
Right.
So what does the business license give you if you can operate without one?
I know. Initially, you can get charged by the day. If the city wants to really hassle you, they can say, like, if you remain open, we're going to charge you $2,500 a day for every day you remain open without a license. I jumped through a few hoops, honestly. Initially, I told them that I was operating as a political party, and I actually formed a small provincial political party and said, this is the headquarters of the political party, and I don't need a business license for that. And they basically left me alone for a year, and then they sort of forgot about me, and then I just never went back. And so it's just sort of been this standoff. There's also sort of a loophole that if you are a nonprofit society, you may not need a business license. So it's just sort of been this gray area that the city has been looking the other way, and dispensaries have been basically nonprofit societies.
I took a slightly different approach to that on the basis that all the laws were kind of coming crashing down as I started my dispensary. I decided that I would do my best to comply to every law out there. I mean, be as honest in this dishonest industry as I possibly could. So I got a business license for holistics so that I could pay my taxes and get a business account, and went with the non-storefront and don't advertise. So that was my way of kind of being a good Samaritan. But I mean, if the federal government wanted to, they could turn around tomorrow and say, your dried herbs are totally illegal and you can't do that, and they could remove my business license. But that's kind of at their discretion. And so far, I mean, they've seen my webpage. It's pretty clear that it says marijuana. It's pretty clear that that's what we're doing. So I don't think that they care right now as long as they get their taxes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I have a business number, and and as far as the federal and provincial government is concerned, we pay payroll taxes, GST and PST. But as far as the city is concerned, where I operate a retail store, they would never offer me a business license unless I just lied and said just garden seeds and didn't say the cannabis part.
Yeah, see, I
But as a
sugar-coated
non-retail
it.
store,
I didn't
you
lie.
don't
I just said
for it.
it's holistics. A bunch of sugar on top, yeah. More questions there? Go ahead. Yay! Woo!
So what are they charging growers to grow in Canada as licenses to grow?
It's really difficult to actually get the new licensed producer certificate. There's only 12 people who have actually been able to get the certificate, and it's really on a huge industrial level that people are getting their legal license. Anyone else who's growing right now is technically illegal or is grandfathered in under the old MMAR situation.
So those that are grandfathered paid like $25 for their license to have it shipped, and those that are MMPR licensed paid millions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the $25 license? That sounds good.
Yeah, that does sound
Yeah,
good. That's so you can grow in your own home, and you can grow within a facility that you've designated that you seem fitting
But
for
then
yourself.
you can't on-sell that to a dispensary
You're not
legally.
You're not legally allowed to, no, but a lot of people do.
Yeah, and that program's not offered anymore. Like, that program ended in 2014, and now this new program, if I were to apply as a new person not having any previous medical license, I would not even have the option to grow anymore. I would just have to pick a licensed producer and buy from him, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's why
Right.
people are really unhappy with this new program.
Yeah, so they're still making lots of criminals in that system. It's
And
really,
also making a lot of money off of really sick people, which is not meant to be.
Gosh, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
The only thing is with a lot of people are saying, the big price, the $18, $15 is really high. But if
It
you
is really
have,
high.
which it is, let's not lie, that's ridiculous. We're used to paying $5 for a gram.
Especially for cannabis that literally should basically cost the
But I
tomatoes.
do see the point of Blue Cross and the other one. They're covering the cost of meds coming from an MMPR. So
Hopefully,
say if you
hopefully.
have a disability where you require this and you have this extra insurance, they're just giving you your weed.
Hopefully.
Where the old stuff, you couldn't go and submit it as a receipt to your company. So there are a few perks, but you have to be in a position to either A, afford the insurance or be in a low enough income to get that benefit. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Question.
Back in the 90s in Canada, when the marijuana regulations were first brought into force, it used to be that the government hired a company called Prairie Systems
You got it.
to grow weed in mine shafts.
Yeah, in mine shafts, you
And
got it.
the outcome of that was that the weed was so bad that the patients who were using it protested to the government about
Yep.
the poor quality. What's been done? Has that problem been solved yet?
Nope. Prairie Plant Systems is still around. They're still one of the licensed producers. They grow in a mine in Manitoba. I don't know why. But they were the original licensed producers back in the day. And if you didn't want to grow your own, then yeah, you would buy that irradiated Prairie Plant Systems weed, sadly. And I really feel like they did that, Health Canada did that almost to show like, oh, medical marijuana doesn't work. It was like a system that was almost designed to fail by getting them to grow like the crappiest weed in the crappiest conditions for people. So that is why like the program did change a little bit, so people were allowed to grow their own, so they could forego the crappy Prairie Plant Systems weed. But unfortunately, they changed it back again. So now, instead of just one Prairie Plant Systems, you have 12 different versions of Prairie Plant Systems.
When those people protested, that's what gave us the opportunity to have medical marijuana dispensaries within Vancouver. They fought and won to be able to supply to the Canadian people on the basis that the supply that was being used currently was not enough to take care of all the patients. And we've been riding on that gray area ever since.
Yeah.
And it's kind of come to a crashing halt with this new changeover. It's just so weird, though, because both systems are working right now side by side, which they're not supposed to. So it makes it really hard for the police to kind of make any kind of sense out of it because they don't know which one's which and what's valid and what isn't.
Yeah, definitely. Police
and there's no way to
discretion
check it
is
either
difficult.
because the system is closed. So there's a phone that just keeps ringing and nobody's there.
Yeah, it's really messed up. It doesn't make it easy on the police because they don't know what legal documentation is anymore for medical marijuana, and a lot of times people who legitimately have the new forms, the police don't even recognize it and end up taking their weed anyway. It's just a really bad situation. Health Canada is very incompetent. That's definitely something I've learned, and almost intentionally so, because then the pharmaceutical companies can get what they want.
So I was one of the first people to actually get medical marijuana from Prairie Plant Systems. I am not very good at growing. I had a team that would teach me.
That's okay.
They taught me well enough that I won some competitions for my pot later on in life, but when I first started out here, I couldn't grow anything, and I got this silver and gold packet with pot in it that had been ground up with the stem and the seed and the leaf and everything and radiated. And we called it Harper Weed because it was so bad.
Yeah.
And we ended up turning it into butter, and it was this really awful color, and we got this small amount. We bought like $800 worth of weed, and we got this tiny little thing like that. And when we were done, it was pretty bad weed, and I never bought weed from them again. I went straight to the dispensaries.
I'm not surprised you didn't enjoy Health Canada's weed. I'm not surprised.
But yeah, it comes in the mail when you buy it from the government, and a lot of the dispensaries now send it through the mail as well, which is kind of interesting. But
technically, the Canada Post people are supposed to know that it's medical weed, and they're not supposed to steal it, so that's good. But it does get stolen once in a while.
It does get
especially when it's going
a lot.
up to the northern, like Northwest Territories and stuff, where there's like one post office for miles. They tend to disappear once in a while, but that's the best that the program can offer right now. So, also the evolution of the American law is really changing the Canadian climate quite a bit. Historically, as I mentioned, whenever the Americans start to modernize a little bit, that gives the Canadians the allowance to do so
to be able to
as
do
well.
the same thing, yeah.
So with Washington State, which basically borders British Columbia and Alaska and Oregon and several other
and California,
states, California, all legalizing. Canada is really probably, hopefully, going to modernize as long as we get maybe Justin Trudeau in office, and hopefully maybe modernize a little bit with the Liberal, a new government in power. But that's my only small ray of hope. Otherwise, it's just going to be more Stephen Harper and more crappy laws.
Yeah, it's going to be more problems, especially with Tony Abbott and Stephen Harper being such good friends. He's always filling his head with new ways to keep us back.
So is Justin Trudeau related to Pierre?
He is. That's
yes,
his son.
That's his son.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that happening in Canada. And I'm a little bit skeptical because Justin is doing exactly what his dad did in the 70s. Pierre Trudeau was like, I'm going to legalize. Just vote for me. I promise. Oh, forgot about that. See ya. And
but you know what? I think
feel
the
like
Americans
Justin,
pressured.
Hopefully.
Pierre Elliott Trudeau, because it was strange that he was totally all pro-pot, and then the Americans came in and he just got quiet.
The
and
Americans were really mad we didn't go to Vietnam too at the time.
Well, that didn't help either,
So I think that didn't help. But maybe now, with this new climate in the Americans,
and the fact that all the Americans are
and
doing it on a
Obama.
state level, I think we're really ready to go to the next level here.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming all this way and sharing.